All right, so get ready because we're going to take a deep dive into some of the most memorable moments from American Horror Story, from the very beginning, Murder House, all the way up to Delicate. And you've really given us a ton of material to work with here, with all these articles about fan favorite scenes and crazy twists.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm excited to kind of relive the chills and thrills.
Yeah, and what's really interesting is that AHS, it doesn't just rely on, like those jump scares or all the gore. It's these memorable moments that they really stick with you because they tap into something deeper, deeper fears and anxieties. They really make you think, even when you're hiding behind a pillow.
Exactly, and sometimes it's just pure fun.
Yeah.
So you've been reading through all these articles. What really stood out to you as we kind of start this journey through the AHS universe?
Well, I mean, we could jump right into, some of the more graphic moments, but I think it's the psychological twists. Those are the things that really stay with you. Like, think about season 1 Murder House and that moment when Violet finds out what's really going on, her true fate.
You mean when she realizes she's been dead the whole time?
Yeah.
I remember watching that for the first time. Oh my God, what a twist. It just changes how you see everything that came before it.
Right, but think about how they built up to that reveal. It's not just about the shock value. They use these subtle hints throughout the entire season, and they're playing with our perception of what's real and what's not, right alongside Violet. And then, that visual of her body under the house decaying, it's horrifying, but it also speaks to, like a deeper fear of being trapped, both physically and emotionally.
Yeah, it makes you question, what's real and what's not. And for Violet, being trapped with Tate in the house takes on a whole new meaning. Do you think the writers intended for that? That romance? I mean, it's twisted, but that romantic element, was that always there, or did it kind of evolve with the reveal?
That's a great question.
Yeah.
I think the beauty of Murder House is that it blurs the lines. On the one hand, you have this tragic love story, but it's built on, lies and deceit and manipulation. And that duality is something that AHS just excels at.
For sure. It's horror. You just can't look away from.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's jump ahead to season 2 Asylum, which takes us on a completely different kind of terrifying ride. What moment from this season kind of stood out to you in the articles?
Oh man, there are so many disturbing scenes in Asylum, but the one that I think resonates the most with me is Lana Winters, getting revenge on Dr. Thredson. After all that she goes through, to see her take control and execute him, it's so powerful.
It really is cathartic, right? Like all that pain and anger, she just channels it into that one act. But it's not just about revenge, right? There's something more going on there.
Exactly. Lana's journey in Asylum is like the perfect example of that victim to survivor arc that AHS, does so often. We see her lose everything, she's subjected to horrific abuse, and yet she comes out of it stronger, more determined.
It's interesting, though, because her way of reclaiming that power, it's still brutal, right? It makes you wonder about the cost of survival, the compromises we make when we face trauma.
Absolutely. Asylum doesn't shy away from those complex situations. It acknowledges that, there aren't always easy answers. Even acts of empowerment can have consequences.
It's a season that sticks with you, that's for sure.
Yeah.
Okay, let's lighten things up a bit now with Coven, a season that brought a little bit of wicked humor to the AHS world. What scene really captures that best?
Oh, there's no doubt about it. It's got to be Myrtle Snow's final moments, right? To be burned at the stake and shout, "Balenciaga!" I mean, it's so unexpected, so absurd, and yet it's just so Myrtle. Like, even facing death, she refuses to be anything less than fabulous. It's camp at its finest. Do the articles talk about how that scene resonated with audiences?
Yeah, they do. A lot of people see it as this testament to her defiance, her refusal to be silenced or broken, even when she's facing, the ultimate punishment.
Yeah, it speaks to a different kind of empowerment, not through physical strength, but through unwavering individuality.
And it plays into the overall theme of Coven, which celebrates, female power in all its forms, the glamorous, the eccentric, even the macabre.
So now for something completely different, let's talk about Freak Show. This season surprised a lot of people with how emotional it was, especially in the way it portrayed Twisty the Clown. What makes his story so powerful?
One of the things AHS does so well is humanize the villains. And Twisty is a prime example. At first he's just this terrifying, almost monstrous figure. But then we get to see his backstory, his abuse, his isolation, the tragedy that led him to wear that mask. It's heartbreaking, right? You go from being scared of him to feeling sorry for him. Do the articles go into the effectiveness of that approach? This idea of giving a monster a human face?
They do, and a lot of people argue that that's what elevates Freak Show, beyond just a typical slasher story. By understanding Twisty's pain, we're forced to think about the idea that sometimes the scariest monsters are created, not born. And that's a much more unsettling thought.
It adds a lot of complexity to the entire season. All right, now we're on to Hotel, a season full of style and featuring one of the most iconic characters, Lady Gaga, as the Countess. What moment from Hotel stands out as super memorable?
That scene where the Countess finally meets her end, it's visually stunning. It's like the slow-motion ballet of blood and betrayal as John Lowe shoots her and her whole world falls apart.
The way she stumbles toward that elevator, her elegant facade is just shattered. It's such a powerful image. What do the articles say about how they use the cameras and the sound in that scene?
They talk about how the slow motion, the music, and the lighting all create this feeling of doom and despair, like we're watching a Greek tragedy unfold, with the Countess's ego finally catching up with her.
Yeah, it's a reminder that even the most glamorous, untouchable characters, they're still mortal. They still face consequences. Hotel definitely explores the dark side of desire and ambition.
And it shows how those desires can really destroy us, especially when we hold on to them past their expiration date. The Countess, trying so desperately to stay young and powerful, ultimately leads to her downfall.
Okay, so let's switch gears now to a season that totally changed what we thought American Horror Story could be. Roanoke. That mid-season twist where the show within a show becomes real is still talked about. What makes that so impactful?
Roanoke plays with the idea of a story within a story in a really brilliant way. We start with what seems like a simple documentary, My Roanoke Nightmare, but then the lines between what's real and what's fake start to blur. And that mid-season twist where the actors playing the characters become the victims, it's genius.
Yeah, it's like the show itself becomes this evil force, trapping everyone in its web. Do the articles mention how this approach, breaking that fourth wall, how that affected the audience?
They do. A lot of viewers felt even more uneasy because Roanoke acknowledged them, their role as the audience watching this horror. It's like the show was saying, you're not safe either.
That's creepy. And it taps into that whole fascination we have with true crime, right? The idea that these horrible things could actually happen. It makes it feel more real, more personal.
Exactly. Roanoke is a masterclass in blurring those lines, making us question what we believe, what we think we know about the world.
All right, let's move on to Cult, a season that felt very timely and maybe a little too close to home for some people. Amidst all the political and social commentary, Allie's transformation from victim to survivor really stands out. What makes her journey so compelling?
Allie's story in Cult is really about the resilience of the human spirit. We see her fall into fear and paranoia. She's completely manipulated by Kai and his followers. But then she fights her way back from the edge and ultimately takes control and ends his reign of terror.
You're right. It's a pretty amazing transformation.
Yeah.
But do you think her final act, shooting Kai, is that purely about empowerment? Or is there something darker there?
That's a good question. And it's one that the articles debate. Some argue that Allie, by defeating Kai, she takes on some of his ruthlessness, his willingness to use violence to get what she wants. It blurs the line between hero and villain and suggests that even when we're fighting for survival, we can become the very thing we're fighting against.
That's a chilling thought, and it adds another layer to her story.
Yeah.
Cult definitely doesn't offer any easy answers, which is probably why it sparked so much discussion. Okay, we've got to talk about Apocalypse, the season that brought back some of our favorite witches from Coven and put them up against the Antichrist. What moment from this crossover event stands out in the articles?
Well, the return of Cordelia, Madison, and Myrtle is pure fan service, and it's amazing. That line, surprise bitch, delivered with so much power, it's iconic. But beyond the nostalgia, it also has a purpose in the story.
It's true. Their arrival changes everything.
Yeah.
Do the articles talk about how the writers balanced what fans wanted to see with the main plot?
Yeah, they do. A lot of people praise Apocalypse for how cleverly it used fan service. It's not just about cameos. It's about giving those beloved characters a real role in the fight against Michael Langdon. They become these symbols of hope, of fighting back against evil.
Yeah, it's a reminder that sometimes a little nostalgia can be a good thing, especially when it's done right. Okay, let's switch gears to 1984, a season that took us back to those 80s slasher films, but also surprised a lot of people with its ending. What scene from this season stands out as memorable?
1984 definitely had that classic slasher feel, but it also twisted some of those tropes. The scene that I think about is Brooke and Donna escaping Camp Redwood. It's a rare happy ending in the world of AHS, and it really connected with fans.
It is refreshing, right? So many horror movies leave you feeling hopeless, but in 1984, these final girls, they actually get a chance at a future. Do the articles talk about the significance of that choice, moving away from the usual violence?
Absolutely. Some see it as a message of hope, a suggestion that Even after going through something horrible, it's possible to heal and move on. It challenges the idea that we're defined by our past, especially by violence.
That's a powerful message. And it speaks to the different ways AHS explores survival. It's not always about fighting back. Sometimes it's about choosing to live to find a way out of the darkness.
Exactly. And 1984 reminds us that those choices can be just as brave, just as impactful. Okay, so let's move on to double feature. This season gave us two different stories, and in Red Tide, Alma's transformation into a villain is especially chilling.
Oh, Alma. She starts out as this sweet, aspiring musician, but her ambition takes a really dark turn. That scene where she kills her own father to protect her success, it's brutal. What do the articles say about her descent into darkness?
They explore the idea that ambition can corrupt and the loss of innocence. Alma's story is a cautionary tale, showing how the desire for greatness can twist even the best people. And that final act, killing her father, it really completes her transformation into a true villain.
It's interesting because that scene also plays with the idea of a child as a monster, which AHS has done before. But with Alma, it's not supernatural. It's just pure human greed and ambition.
Right. It reminds us that sometimes the most terrifying monsters are the ones we create ourselves, the ones who look just like us.
Okay, let's talk about NYC, a season that tackled some serious topics, especially the AIDS epidemic and how it affected the LGBTQ plus community.
Yeah.
One scene that stands out is that haunting Grim Reaper dance sequence.
Yeah.
What makes those images so powerful?
That scene is both beautiful and terrifying. The Grim Reaper, this elegant but menacing figure dancing in the city, it becomes a symbol of death always being present, the fear and uncertainty of that time.
And it's not just about being afraid of dying, right? It's about a whole community facing a crisis, this feeling of helplessness and loss.
Yeah.
You can almost feel it.
Exactly. NYC uses those surreal images to capture the anxiety of that time, the stigma around AIDS, and the way it impacted the LGBTQ plus community so deeply.
It's a reminder that horror can be more than just jump scares and gore. It can be about exploring the dark side of history, the things that shape our lives and our fears.
And that brings us to Delicate, the latest season of AHS. This one really pushed the limits of body horror, especially in that scene where Anna hallucinates her skin turning into scales. What did the article say about those images?
That scene is definitely disturbing. It's like a visual representation of her anxiety and paranoia, her fear of losing control of her body and mind. Do the articles connect this to any of the bigger themes of the season?
They do. A lot of people see it as a commentary on the pressures women face, especially during pregnancy. Society expects mothers to be happy and glowing, but Delicate shows the darker side of that experience, the physical and emotional vulnerability that comes with having a baby.
It's a reminder that horror can be found in everyday life, in those seemingly ordinary things that can become terrifying when you look at them a certain way. And body horror especially, it really gets under your skin, makes you question what it means to be human.
Exactly. And Delicate doesn't shy away from those uncomfortable feelings. It forces us to confront our own anxieties about our bodies, our identities, the things we can't control.
You've brought up some incredible moments from each season. It's amazing how American Horror Story, even though it's an anthology series, manages to create these recurring themes and visuals that tie everything together.
It's true. And those recurring elements like the haunted house, the monstrous child, the victim to survivor arc, those are the things that give the show its unique identity.
Okay, so before we move on to American Horror Stories, I think it's important to acknowledge the actors who bring these characters to life. They're a huge part of what makes these scenes so memorable, so impactful.
Absolutely. Jessica Lange, Sarah Paulson, Evan Peters, Kathy Bates, they've all given these iconic performances that have become synonymous with American Horror Story.
Their ability to embody these complex, often disturbing characters is amazing. They're not afraid to go to those dark places to explore the full range of human emotion, and that's what makes their performances so captivating.
And they're not just playing villains or victims. They're playing real people, flawed individuals who make choices good and bad and face the consequences. That's what makes them relatable even when they're doing horrible things.